Well, after that introduction to the show, let's dive a little bit deeper and have a good conversation with someone that actually understands the data and the real world implications of some of what we're talking about here with the Federal Reserve Bank's non-debt limit deal. I have as my guest today Ed Dowd, author, researcher, investor, fascinating guy actually in so many different ways. Ed, thank you so much for giving us some of your time here at the Aussie Wire.
Great to be here, Tofro. So happy to be with you today.
Look, there are genuinely a lot of things that you and I could discuss, and we're going to try and cover a bit of ground in a short amount of time. Can we start with your book, Cause Unknown? You really were on the cutting edge of research around what's happening with all of these unexplained sudden deaths that are happening, these excess deaths. There are many people that deny it's even happening. Despite what the data may say. So can you give us a rundown of what have you found and why did you find it, why did you believe that it needed to be written about and publicised in a way that was, at the time, quite damaging to your reputation in some circles?
Yeah, absolutely. So I wrote the book for my loved ones and other people's loved ones to convince them that there's something going on that's not being reported on.
Mm,
In COVID 2020, people did die. There were excess deaths, but they're mostly old. Then
mm,
suddenly in 2021 and 22, we saw a mix shift from old to young. The young, we knew early on, were not at risk from COVID,
mm,
and suddenly they started dying in statistically improbable ways across Europe, the U.S., and now we have some data on Australia that I'll be talking about
mm,
when I come out there in about a week.
mm,
So the bottom line is it's showing up in deaths, excess deaths. U.S. disabilities took off. U.S. absence rates and work time loss took off. We're seeing the same results in the U.K. And our day jobs, we're financial professionals. We're trying to raise a hedge fund, and we do economic forecasting. And we believe the Federal Reserve is going to make a policy mistake because they look at unemployment, and unemployment is low, and it's low because the labor force is smaller due to
mm,
injuries
mm,
and disabilities and
mm.
deaths. So they're gonna err on the side of deflation, and we just dropped a report today where we're predicting deflation by Q1 of 2024. We think the Fed's response will be more QE, a resumption of quantitative easing,
Mm-hmm.
and the introduction of a central bank digital currency. So this is a disaster incoming. We see recession in Q3 and Q4.
I want to get to all of those topics in just a second, but if I can stay on this excess deaths issue, during COVID, we had here. I'm from Victoria, Melbourne, the most locked down city in the world during COVID, and we had the media screaming at us over individual deaths. One death was enough to make a headline. Now we're seeing in Australia, I believe the latest figures are still up around 16% excess deaths, I believe, but it'll be up around that number somewhere. And yet the media are showing an astonishing lack of curiosity. Why is there such a difference in the way these are being treated?
Yeah, that's one of the things I said in my conclusion in my book. I said, look, we believe it's the vaccines, and if it's not the vaccines, the data is the data. What is it, and why is there silence on this?
Mm,
And I think it's circular logic. There's silence because it's a cover up at this point. And I say that it's a cover up from the global health authorities and governments of the world. They just
mm,
want this to go away.
mm,
And you're right. In Australia, our research has shown that excess deaths at the end of 2022 we're running around 16, 17%,
mm,
way up from 2021. And you had a minus 2% excess death in 2020. So it's
mm.
whatever is going on in your country is, if you don't believe it's the vaccines, which I believe it is, the health response has been a disaster and caused more deaths. So
Mm,
regardless, it needs to be
mm,
investigated and
mm,
talked about.
mm. I think that's the key there. It needs to be investigated. It needs to be talked about. And we're not seeing that curiosity from the media or that oversight and investigation from governments. Moving on to the topic you were just moving to. In the introduction to this show, I talked about the US debt ceiling non-deal, where they've effectively just suspended it and said for 18 months there isn't going to be one. They're forecasting, correct me if I'm wrong, an additional $4 trillion in debt by the end of that period compared to what there was in January when the debt ceiling officially was reached. For those that aren't aware of what quantitative easing does and why you believe that a resumption is going to be so damaging, can you just give us a rundown of what you expect from the US government, from the US Fed, and why you believe it's going to lead to some of these negative outcomes?
So what the Fed has done with their interest rate hikes in a very short period of time, one of the most rapid rate increases from 0 to 5% in about 13 months. And it's after a 14-year interest rate zero rate policy,
Mm,
it's causing damage financially and all sorts of institutions. And so the money supply has dropped to -4% year over year in growth, which we haven't seen since 1930. Let me say that again, since 1930.
Yeah, that's a significant
This is
date.
correct. So the money supply is shrinking, and the Fed is making a mistake, and they're doing quantitative tightening. And then we have the budget deficit, which you just alluded to, which is going to be a giant sucking sound of liquidity, which is already out of, we have money supply year over year growth negative. The money supply and this deficit are going to be a liquidity drain on the economies of the world. And this treasury is going to gobble up all the excess supply. And that means other financial assets are going to take on water, in addition to the fact the underlying economy is bad and earnings are going to go down. So it's conspiring to be a deflationary death knell by Q, and it'll be written about by then. We're saying it now because we predict. We don't wait for the headlines to tell us.
Ed, you're an absolute ray of sunshine. Such a wonderfully positive outlook you've given us there. What would you say for the average person? Obviously, we cannot give financial advice. We do not give financial advice. But what are your general observations about what the average wage earning, tax paying, living somewhat paycheck to paycheck person can and should do, given that outlook?
Well, if you have any control over your pension and the allocation of your pension, putting some of your retirement into cash is not a bad idea. And do what's Warren Buffett doing? Warren Buffett has amassed a treasure trove of cash, and he will buy at the bottom. So try to be a little bit like Warren Buffett. And if you don't have any retirement savings, start a rainy day fund today, in case you lose your job. So just prepare for the storm. Don't be in fear. Everything's going to be okay. The world's not going to end. When you get in fear, it causes anxiety and depression, and then you have health problems. So this is, we've seen recessions before. We're going to get through it, but try to be smart about it, and don't be one of these people selling everything at the bottom.
Yeah, no, fantastic. Thank you, Ed. Now, you mentioned earlier that you are coming to Australia. I'm going to be there. You're coming for a one-night only, Perth-only event. That's right, Perth. You've been feeling left out from all these East Coast events for all these decades. Well, now you're the special ones. You get Ed Dowd, and nobody else does. Ed, what's your message for Australia when you come over here?
Look, one thing I love about Australia, you guys, you're united, and unfortunately, you're united in the COVID mishap. My hope is that I can convince people that they've been defrauded, and then as quickly as you united around COVID, you can unite around the fraud and changing it. And I would love for Australia to shame the Yanks, shame the Seppos, and remove the vaccine from the market and get ahead of the U.S. I'd love for Australia to be ahead of us.
Well, we used to project this image to the world of being larrikins and resistant to authority, etc. And obviously that stereotype we created for ourselves was well and truly shattered during the realities of the COVID era. But I share your hope that maybe we can find our spine again and start to lead in that way. Ed Dowd, it's such a pleasure. I look forward to seeing you in person in Perth. Links to get tickets to the Perth event will be in the description, along with tickets to watch the live stream of the Perth event, just in case you're not able to get there. But Ed, I look forward to seeing you there in just, I believe, 9 days' time.
Yes, and I'm looking forward to coming to Australia, my first visit, so I'm excited.
Fantastic. Thanks, Ed. Really appreciate it.
Take care.